What's up, amigos? Camino Jaime here. Today we're going to do a Magnolia standard deck profile. So I'm excited because we got some cards like Goki over here from Festival Collection and Integrate and Play, and a little bit of a Vital Roll too. I know set 2 is coming around, but I just wanted to show this off real quick before we start using the new cards from the set 2. So this is still going to be set 1 and of course from Festival Collection. So let's get right into it. Hey there, amigos. Quick sponsorship shout outs. So NexLevelGaming has the playmats available. As you can see, I have the Zorga playmat. It's super nice, really good quality too. There's some for the other units and characters from overdress too. So if you're a fan of those, definitely check out the website. You can click on the description below for the 10% discount to get a 10% discount on your next purchase. So starting off with a winning image, what does Magnolia even do? And so the skill is that when it attacks as a Vanguard, at the end of the battle that it attack, you can counterblast one, choose one of your rearguards, and until the end of that turn, it can attack from the back row, and it gets an additional plus 5k until the end of the turn. So that is very vital. And not only that, but if you Persona roll this turn, you can choose up to 3 rearguards instead. And so that way you can start seeing that you can start having 4 to 6 attacks, depending if you did Persona right or not. Going first, grade 3, you'll get your 4 attacks, or you could just use the skill to give you more power in a column, or you may not even use the skill depending on what your opponent may damage check. And then once you actually start Persona writing, you can start having that pressure too, and really that gives you more power to your field as well. And so one of the things that just to have in mind, it's almost similar to Aquaforce. So if you are an Aquaforce player or have faced Aquaforce, you notice one of the things that has stopped them back in the day is that when the opponent damage checks a trigger, it would actually stop their plays, and so it'll be very struggle. So one of the key things that you want to have with Magnolia is that you want to make sure you make some key columns in case of that happens too, and I'll cover some of those plays. And what was really helpful was a guide from X's Vanguard. They did the deck study guide for Magnolia. Shout out to those guys, especially Zeleas, and then of course he had some help with Cypher and Zay a little bit with that too. But it's a phenomenal article, and I already have it linked in the description so you can check it out. So a lot of those tips too with that pattern of attacks helps with that. So I'll break that down in the combo section too a little bit too, so that's helpful visual. But I highly recommend checking out the deck study guide. It's super helpful at that point. So with the goal of multi-attacking, what really helps with these cards? So one of the key things that helps, certain things like such as over here with Cheris as a rearguard, it has a back row rearguard circle skill. So during the battle that this unit attacks, and it gets additional plus 5k. So with the power up with Magnolia, this is an 18k hitter from the back row. That demands a 10k shield, which in this game and this point in time with the game, we only have the 5ks and the 15k shields. So that demands either 2 cards or forces a 15k drop at that point. And then if you actually give the power to, like, let's say from Advantage, another additional plus 5, that becomes 23k. So that starts really demanding for that 15k. So having that pressure. So it's a good unit just to have that as that 4th attack that pokes. And then you have cards over here like Dogger that really gives you, if you have 4 or more other rearguards, this unit gets plus 5k. One of the things about this deck, you realize that you need to pretty much run your turns with 1 to 2 counterblasts. Cards like Dogger actually don't require counterblast, so it helps with that, but you still are able to get the benefit of this becoming a 15k, which can hit a Vanguard that is grade 3, or it can demand 10k shield against a Vanguard that is a grade 2 because of a 10k base at that point. Also, it makes the 23k column with an 8k booster, so that's very helpful with that regard. And what's really cool is we can use Spiritual Body Condensation to revive key units that we need. That way our boards are set up, and then we have cards like Koki from the new Festival Collection that can be called behind the Vanguard, and it's the only way that it can call. It cannot even be written, but it's a 15k base grade 1. So what it really does, it can make that Vanguard column into a 28k column, but you could also make that attack from the back row, making it a 20k beater as well. And over here with Ganosola, however you said that, you can call him Care Bear, you can call him G Bear, and Atlas from Nexus the Night calls him Glow Nibbles. And I had no idea at first until I looked closely at it, and I can see it now. But yeah, so this card's phenomenal. So it's a back row rearguard circle skill. So when it attacks, you can counterblast 1, choose one of your other rearguards. That unit gets this unit's power until the end of the turn. So you can start bouncing, let's say like a drive check, or even power from Admantis, or even power up from Spiritual Body Condensation, and then this bounces it to another unit in addition to it. And so you can really start making those bigger numbers, so you don't have to worry about a trigger being damaged deck really stop your plays. So that helps also with that in mind too. And so with this deck, you want to play a tempo for sure, and then keep in mind with your advantage. And as we go some of the card choices, things will make a lot of more sense too. So for the right line, we are playing the starter that you want to play. I'm playing the shiny one. And then we have Rancor Chain. So with Magnolia, there are different choices that you can play in the grade 1 and grade 2 slot when it comes to the right line. One of the things that I like Rancor Chain is that because it's a guaranteed skill where you can just ride Soul Blast 1, you draw 2, and then you can discard an order card, and if you don't, or you can't, you discard 2. So that skill is always guaranteed, whereas the other grade 1, you kind of like, if you don't get a unit, you soul charge it, and so it's like kind of thing. And so for me, I just wanted to also dig deeper into the deck, and Rancor Chain does that too. It helps with Zorga, so it can help with Magnolia as well. And so sometimes your hand might not be as great, and even though you're discarding for the right line, you still want a better hand. And so Rancor Chain can help with that, with digging deeper and then discarding the cards that you may not need as well, especially if you open with too clutter over a hand, especially if you like have a lot of grade 3s, for example, or a lot of triggers. You can just filter for those actual pieces like your grade 1s and your grade 2s that you could actually use in the early game, mid game, and late game, of course, with that progression. So I highly recommend that. And then of course, if you use an order card as a Rearguard Circle skill, it gets an additional 2k, so it becomes a 10k booster. You can Soul Blast it with other card effects such as Lattice over here, or like Spiritual Body, Condensation, and so on. So you can have access to it as a Rearguard if you really need to as well. And with the grade 2, that can also vary with either Lattice or Hush Dragon. I went with Lattice over here. So again, when Magnolia rides the top of it, so your grade 3 turn, you can actually Soul Blast and call the top card of your deck. And then if it's a unit, you call it, but if it's an actual order card, you actually add it to your hand. So you still +1 no matter what. And depending on what you need to work with, you're gonna call Rearguards with that Magnolia turn. So Lattice still helps with that. And if you do call a trigger, you could always call it behind the Vanguard or maybe a booster for a Rearguard. And then eventually when you Persona ride, you can actually have it go up to the front, which can become a 15k beater on its own at that point. So there has some merit to it still, but I really like that aspect, because with Hush Dragon, you really need to see an order card in the drop to actually get that +1. Of course, it doesn't use a Soul Blast, so it's a safe bet, but it's just something that I'm trying out, and I feel like this is a better combination for me, at least, and then of course Magnolia, 4 to 6 battles, you know, Persona Knight if you're not. So let's start going into the grade 2s, and then we'll go into the grade 1s, the triggers, and we'll be done. Onto our grade 2/Magnolia copies. So with the Magnolia copies, you want to max out because you want a Persona ride so you get the maximum benefit. You don't really need to play other grade 3s. There's that new grade 3 that also came out with Festival Collection. That is, I feel like, more of a preference at that point. For me, I decided not to play it, and it also makes a little more room for the grade 2s and the grade 1 slots, for example. And so going into Ghost Chase over here, this is a blitz order, and so when your opponent attacks, you can actually activate this from your hand. You can choose one of your units, it gets +5k until the end of the battle, and then you can choose one of your Rearguards and bounce it back that is not being attacked currently. So that's super helpful because you can actually call Rearguards to the field, and then you could also potentially get them back too. So it can help you play a little aggressively while still serving a 5k shield as normally a grade 2 would. So that's why I highly recommend playing 3 copies, and then you can start bouncing cards like Alania over here to be able to trigger again, or add Mantis. And so what Alania does over here is that when she is placed onto a Rearguard Circle from hand, you can Counterblast, Soul Blast 1, choose a grade 2 or less card from your drop, and then call it to Rearguard, and it gets +5k to the end of the turn. So that can help with making numbers such as like 23k columns, or giving an attacker a booster such as like a Cherish, for example, making that 23k column or attacker happen in that case, for example. And then many examples too. You can even call the Care Bear over here and give it power, so it's even more power to be able to transfer it, which could be a transition right now where this card again is, you know, when it attacks from the back row, Counterblast, give its power to another unit. I feel like the 3 copies is really good because like I feel 4 might be too cluttered, and you may not have to use that skill every single turn. So having at least 3 will guarantee you at least 1 by basically your grade 3 turn, especially with Rancor helping you dig deeper, of course, and then Superior Calling with Lattice when you ride on top of it, so you could chances to see it a little more. I felt like 3 has been working with me. 3 with Alania too, the same reason too, and it's a good early game card too if you want to actually call this on your grade 2 turn, for example. Counterblast, Soul Blast, you can Soul Blast the Rancor Chain, bring it back. That's an additional booster that can be used and really have that 23k line, while your Vanguard can attack solo with a 10k, so you're still applying some early game without committing too much from hand. And then over here, lastly, Dogre, again, like I said, he's a 15k beater when you have 4 or more other Rearguards. 4 of these guys because he's so vital, because that way you can still work with your turns even with 1 counterblast, and so you can have 2 in the front if you want to, and then you can maneuver some stuff in the back row too as well if you persona roll that turn and makes things sense. And then at the same time, it helps with, you know, with that 4 attack turn where you can make a 23k line as well. Again, those triggers being damage check really suck, so having that in mind and having those optimal playstyle in case of the event helps with that. And then as they get close to 5 damage, you can really push for game with those little pokes overall. Onto the gray one. So we're playing 3 Admantis over here. Admantis, when it's on place, you can actually give another unit plus 5k. So this is something you can call from hand, from the drop zone, and so on. If your units get imprisoned, you can call this guy and get the benefit of it. It's just a really simple yet effective card, and so playing 3 at least has you the ability to see 1 or 2, so that way you can get plus 5k to make some numbers a lot more easier in Magnolia. So that's very vital, and so I recommend with 3 as well. And so over here with Spiritual Body Condensation, you want to play at least 3 for sure. I've seen people play 4, which is perfectly fine. For me, I was trying to fit stuff in, so I actually reduced this to 3, and I think it's something that I've been working with just fine too. And sometimes you may not always have to use it, and at the same time that Soul Blast can be a cringe a little bit too, where you may need that soul for, let's say, for Alania for example, or a Lattice if you brought it back for example, and then other skills too. And then after a while you start realizing that the only way to build up soul really is to persona ride every single turn at that point, if you think about it that way too. So but Spiritual Body Compensation, obviously, you know, Soul Blast 1, revive something, give it plus 5k. It's super vital, so that way your turns are still smooth as going. Magnolia, you know, it has that old Aquaforce problem, but one of the things that Aquaforce didn't have back then is now we have a card that is revival. So cards that we may have lost through retire, through battle, or even damage check and heal, you can still grab those cards and make an effective turn at that point too. So it helps the consistency of executing your turns too. So over here, Cherish, we're playing 3 copies of it. I wanted to play 4, but there's only so much room, so I took out the 4th one and added Cookie over here, if that's how you pronounce it. Kusi or Cookie, I have no idea. But with Cherish, again, 18k beater from the back row, and then if you give it a plus 5k, it's a 23k. So it's just super nice just to have this guy in the back row as that multi-attacker poke, especially if you have 4 attacks. So it's just a nice easy thing that you can commit to, and then if you have multiple, it just gets even more nuttier. And then over here, Kosi or Koki, this card cannot be written, and it can only be called to the back row center Rigard Circle. So again, it's going to be basically living behind your Vanguard as serving as a booster or an attacker from the back row. And you know, in set 2 there is it's a Rigard Circle swapper kind of thing like that, so that might be an option in the future. So I've seen people play 2 copies. I wanted just to play 1. It's more of a supplemental card in my view, but in the next set that might change as well, so just have an open mind with that. And then of course lastly here we have the PGs. Again, if you have 1 or less in hand, you do not have to discard. You want to play this so that way you can conserve hand in those cases where your hand is very small at that point too. And for the last part of the deck profile here, we have the triggers. So we're playing the 4 heals, 8 crits, 3 draw, and 1 of the over trigger. And so with the crits, you definitely want to play as many crits as possible. I feel like this is pretty sufficient. I've seen builds that play more draw, and I definitely understand the reasoning behind that. So there is nothing wrong with playing more draw. Magnolia again is more of a combo based deck. If you really think about it, if you want to maximize those 6 attacks, you have to have 5 rear guards, you know, and so that may be committing more cards from your hand. So that's why the draw triggers help. For me, I felt like playing the 3 here with the over trigger, almost like a sense of 4 draw triggers helps with that regard. I don't see front triggers being as beneficial. One of the things about front triggers too, it forces you to feel like you have to attack with the Vanguard first, in the hopes that you would drive check it too. So with Magnolia, you may want to poke with the rear guard first in the front, and then have Magnolia actually attack, and then you can actually, depending if they take a damage or not, and if they do get a trigger, you can actually better coordinate your rest of the attacks, whether you do only 3 attacks or you do the 4 or you do the 5, 6, depending on that regard. What helps too is the over trigger with the Cray Elemental. There's also Blessed Favor, the Stoicheia over trigger. I think either way is fine, but with one of the things that I've been focused on lately is really just being able to distribute another 100 million power onto the board. There might be times where you don't have either the second counterblast or don't have the Care Bear unit that can actually bounce that 100k million for that example, or just be able to like have a decent field. So having the overdrive trigger, if you do drive check it, you can actually have those two, more than another unit, have 100 million power, and that could mean the difference too. Because what I noticed with Magnolia, depending on the tempo that you play, you basically put your opponent to 4 to 5 pretty easily, to the point where it matters, where you could start poking and really taking those cards from their hand, because they have to guard everything when they're in 5 damage. The critical pressure from Bless Favor, the other over trigger, feel isn't as needed in this deck because in multi-attacks, where in Zorga can only do 3 attacks, and it definitely wants to see critical triggers to make those attacks count even more. But in Magnolia, since we multi-attack, the criticals aren't as needed, but you know, it really depends on the over trigger that you want to have as a preference. So I just wanted to give a little bit of time on that and just explain it too. There's no wrong over trigger, and I feel with the next set that could also change and might even go more to the other trigger as well. Now onto the combo part of the video. So I'm gonna do the grade 2 turn plays that you can do to help some early aggression that are also pretty much making numbers too, and also minimal effort too as well. So for example, once you ride to grade 2, one of the minimal plays that you can do is call Elania from hand, and then use her skill to kind of bless and soul blast, so that way you can call right here the Rancor Chain behind it. It'll get +5 as well. So what happens is that you'll make a 23k column right here, and so when you attack, you can attack with your Vanguard first, do a drive check, and then attack with this rigor column. So if they get a trigger, this still hits over. So for example, if they're like at grade 1, they'll be 18k with a trigger. If they're at grade 2, they have basically 20k base if they hit a trigger as well. So this still hits over that too. Another option is using Admantis and then any other unit in front of it as well. So for example, let's say we call a trigger here, and then we call Admantis, and Admantis gives it +5 over here. This will make an 18k column. So going first, this is good for a grade 1 Vanguard. So again, you would do the same play where you attack with your Vanguard and you drive triggers, and again, if they become 18k, this still hits. And then what's really cool is that they probably will attack this or leave this on board depending on what it is, because one, it's a trigger, so it's not super threatening for them, especially when you go to your first grade 3 turn. It's still a 5k, and so for them, they might leave it as that, so you can use it as a combo piece potentially. But if they do get rid of it, then it's not a big deal. And what happens is that you can keep the Admantis back here, so that way in case you have like a ghost chase, you can bounce it back to your hand as well and reuse it as well. So once you ride to grade 3, you can use Lattice's skill to superior call something. Let's say you get a Dogger, for example, and you build a field that looks like this. So this is just one example. What's really cool, you just need one counterblast for this play, so you're going to do 4 attacks at this point. And one of the sequencing of placing the cards is that you want to place Admantis and give the +5k here to Cheris over here, so that way when Cheris attacks, it'll be a 23k beater on its own, thanks to the power up with Magnolia as well, and its own skill too. So this helps with getting around damage triggers as well, like I mentioned. And one of the first attacks that you want to do going as your first battle is with Dogger. So Dogger will get the +5k, so it'll be 15k. So this can hit 13k Vanguards, but not only that, but if your opponent's still grade 2, it'll force a 10k shield as well at that point. So let's say they do get a trigger, you can play it safe where this attacks as a 23k column. And then your third battle can be Magnolia with the Koki or Kosi, however you pronounce it. This is 15 plus 13 makes 28. And at the end of the battle, you can counterblast, give Charis +5k and attack from the back row. And then if you had any triggers, you can put them on it. This can be at a minimum a 23k plus attack. So you get your 4 attacks. So that way you are planning to overcome a trigger just in case that were to happen. Now obviously an over trigger stops everything, but that's just an over trigger. So this is an example of a play. This turn assumes that you persona road, and so your front will get the additional 10k. And if you have like a unit like the G Bear over here, you can do a really powerful attack distribution using an extra counterblast. So we can use 2 counterblasts in this example, and this is assuming your opponent's at 5 damage, so they pretty much have to guard everything at this point. And so one of the key plays that you can do is attack with the Vanguard first. So this is 23k. You get drive checks, you distribute the triggers, then at the end of the battle, counterblast, choose the 3 back row units, they get +5k, and they all can attack from the back row. Now with Admantis, I would say that during the main phase, you give the +5 to the G Bear as well, so it's a little bit bigger. So you can attack with your weakest unit, which in this case would be Admantis as a 13k hitter. then the bear can attack as well if you want to use the skill right away, where you can give it to let's say chairs, for example. And so in here, let's say this is only 15k, so we didn't get any triggers. This will give chairs a plus 15k boost, and since because of its skill and Magnolia it's 18 plus 15, that makes 33. So that's a really good number in that respect too. And then since it's 33 at that point, you can attack with the other weaker units. And in front row, Dugers can attack with about 25k, because again, you Persona Road. And then you have the second one over here. And then finally, your sixth attack is that 33k hit. So you can really plan out your strategy and really do some effective attacks. Of course, you may have some weaker ones. And in those cases, that's where you may want to boost instead of attack by itself. So just be mindful of those plays too as well, especially if they're like a 3 or 4 damage. You may want to attack with the bear first, give the power to Cheris, and then if they get it triggered, then this can boost the Duger, for example, and still have a solid column to attack here in that regard too. And that's the deck profile, amigos. I hope you enjoyed it. I really enjoyed learning how to play Magnolia. It reminds me of the old Aquaforce style, and I'm excited for the new set that there's some key cards that make this deck even better too. So I felt like, you know, with the starter deck and then going into set 1, there were still some missing components that this deck really needs, and going into set 2 is going to help fix that too as well. I really appreciate even a simple card as Koki over here, where it's a 15k booster for Magnolia. We kind of really needed that, because I know that Magnolia attacks in the beginning are very easy to guard with, or, you know, negligible at that point. So it just helps with like little things like that. And with the decks like this, it's rearguard centric, so you have to see the big picture, and as you get to play more with it, you start to understand it at a deeper level too. So it's a deck that I really appreciate as well, and as long as with Zorga too. So I wanted to give a quick shout out to Win an Image too. He had some really solid videos on Magnolia. I see he's a man of culture. I didn't realize that his favorite deck from overdress is actually Magnolia, so definitely check out his videos, a different perspective too. What's really cool too, as you may have noticed, I got a new mat, and as you can see, this is a Zorga mat from NexLevelGaming too, so it's really nice actually. So I don't know with the camera, but as you can see, the art is really crisp, really smooth. I like the skulls too coming over here with the staff. It's just really cool. The order zone is a little more, you can see you can place your order cards, so when you do Alchemagic or any of the order cards that you use for Magnolia, and then the damage is big enough too. And if you really want to, you can also have the right deck on the right too. I know some players don't like this, and in fact sometimes I find myself just putting my right deck here. But it's all preference, but it's really a nice mana, and as you can see, the art is just really sick. So it's really cool. And so if you want to check out some of the other mats for the different nations too, you feel free to check out his website. I actually have a 10% discount in the description link, so you can have a 10% discount on your next purchase and also support the channel. And so with that, amigos, I appreciate you for looking at the deck profile and everything. I know this is a bit late, but it's better you know, late than never, right? And I do expect to make more deck profiles for Magnolia and Zorga, since set 2 is coming around the corner, so I will make updates to the decks too, so keep on the lookout for that as well. So with that, amigos, like the video if you liked it, comment down below what are you guys' thoughts for the new set, what are you guys' thoughts for like experiencing with Magnolia and Zorga. I love to hear about and talk about like Stoicheia conversations. And then if you know an amigo that likes this content, whether it be overdress or just like Stoicheia, feel free to share the video to them and subscribe. So bye, amigos.